"I've got a trailer full of it if you need any more," were his exact words when I thanked him. Even Dave and Madeline, the couple that I'd bought the water tank from, knocked on our door and offered to lend us thousands of dollars for as long as we wanted. Such displays of generosity and from strangers. It was unreal, and we will never forget these initial introductions. We soon learned that most people there behaved in much the same manner. If they didn't need something, they gave it to somebody that did. Thank you, all good people. My nephew Paul was getting married in England on 23rd March this year. We had an invitation. I don't think we were expected to go, but the young'uns don't know the lengths to which us old folks will go to for a free meal, so we went. The planning was a nightmare. We had to drive to Los Angeles and fly from there to England. On our return, we had to motor the 2,000 miles back to Canada to arrive no later than 15th April. Bear in mind, we are in Mexico where there isn't a travel agent on every corner, but we managed to book a satisfactory flight. We decided to drive to LA alongside the Salton Sea and through the abundance of date plantations in that area. The overnight stay in Palm Springs was an experience we will remember. We were in awe walking around this hot and very affluent desert home of many famous stars and seeing some of their names on street signs. Bob Hope Drive is the first one to come to mind, but there were many others. When we could walk no more, we parked the van on a supermarket car park and settled in for a comfortable and restful night. Driving through Los Angeles brought back many interesting memories, so we daydreamed as we headed for Marina del Rey. It was wonderful to revisit this fabulous place. Nothing had changed. Many of our friends were still around, and even our boat was in the very same slip and still looked a bobby dazzler. One guy we had to see was Paul Muggleston, our sex-mad friend. He was surprised and pleased to see us. We drank a few bevies while we exchanged stories. Paul had been the advertising representative for an Australian soft drink company, but he told us that this had finished about 2 years earlier and he hadn't worked since. I invited him to be our guest for dinner at our favorite Chinese restaurant that night. He offered to drive and set the time and place. You can imagine our surprise when he pulled up in a stretch limousine. He told us that it was his when I muttered something about the cost. "I thought you had no money," I blurted out. "I said that I hadn't worked in 2 years. I didn't say I had no money," was his proud reply. Treating this guy to dinner didn't make much sense to me, but off we went for a meal and a damn good laugh. I say that because, as a professional sex maniac, he had to make a pass at the shapely waitress. She turned out to be a guy. Paul reciprocated and took us to a dinner party the following evening at the local yacht club. But he disappeared with a gorgeous bit of fluff halfway through. When we visited him on his grand 40-foot yacht the next morning, he was still enjoying the girl's company in bed. We hung a bottle of champagne on the hatch with an appropriate note and left. What a life this guy leads. After visiting a few more old friends, we flew to the UK and spent an enjoyable time with both our families. The wedding was delightful, and my baby nephew was now a married adult with a beautiful wife, Debbie, and living in a real nice house of his own. Look after each other, kids, and have a happy life together. We flew back on 31st March, picked up the van from our good friend Gordon, who had kindly let us store it on his property, and drove straight through to Casa Chica, which we had called our winter home. The few days we had left flew by with packing and securing our little house for the summer. We were told not to spend too much time waterproofing the roof, as it almost never rained down there. Little did we know, but you'll have to wait a while. We attended to the necessary and set off once again. This time, we knew what we were heading for, and we weren't carrying such a heavy load, so we felt more comfortable. We headed north 5th April, retracing our downward journey to Las Vegas. To my great disappointment, Rita instructed me to drive straight through. It was 7 a.m., and I had to, more or less, force our rig through the lines of rush hour traffic. More upholstery off Rita's arm. Rest. We now took Paul's recommended scenic route. I thought we'd never get to Fallon. It was indeed more scenic than the other route, but still very boring. The only thing worth mentioning is the numerous ranches. These had lavish gateways with flashing neon signs like Rose's Ranch. Rita commented on the unusual names. She had forgotten that bordellos were legal in Nevada. We had a good laugh passing all these massive brothels with their own airstrips, thinking about the wealthy Michaels that apparently fly in from all over the country. We bypassed Reno and arrived in Fallon, where we planned an overnight rest. Free parking for trailers was offered at one casino, so that's where we stayed. The dinner was superb, but maybe it tasted better because I actually won enough to pay for it. The next morning, we awoke to dead quiet. The heavy snow was muffling the usual traffic noises. It was falling like giant cotton wool balls, and we were warned that we shouldn't attempt to cross the mountains just north of town. We wouldn't make it. Being a silly gobbin, we set off. We found the conditions to be not as bad as what we expected. Weather forecasts are the same all over world, right? Thankfully, we had made the right decision and got through without a hitch, other than the one attaching the trailer to the van. We wended our way through Oregon. It was somewhere along this stretch that the elders of one small town, in their infinite wisdom, decided to repave the town's streets all at once. The whole place was like the rocky road to Dublin. We bounced all over place, cursed a lot, and finally reached the stretch of road that the maniacs hadn't started to dig up yet. Somewhat annoyed, actually I was livid, about what the lack of planning had put us through, we continued on into Washington. Soap Lake would be a clean place to spend the night. The reason for the town's name was clear. Unlike the lake, it was like a giant dolly tub with white scum all around the shoreline. It really wasn't dirty. It was some chemical or other. We literally rushed a meal down at the local cafe as all the other customers looked like they belonged in the movie Deliverance. It was our fertile imagination, but we didn't hang about just in case. The local trailer park was officially closed, but the gates were open, so in we went. There were 2 other couples just arriving who must have been as cheap as us, so we didn't feel too guilty. As soon as we all got our rig set for the night, we relaxed with a few beers. After we enjoyed a communal breakfast the next morning, we continued north passing the Grand Coulee Dam to Highway 97, which went straight into Canada alongside the massive Colville Indian Reservation. It was an easy route, as naturally, there were arrows pointing the way. Crossing the border this time was a pain in the neck. We happened to get a customs guy that couldn't smile, or he was wearing a mask. He asked us where we had bought our new-looking tires, and when I told him Quebec before we had left, he wanted to see the receipt. I started looking this while he went all through our van and trailer. He wouldn't believe that we had neither fags nor booze. After about half an hour of this crap, I told him if he wanted the bloody receipt so badly, he would have to continue looking for contraband and he might just stumble on it. I sure as hell wasn't going to spend any more time looking. He let us through. By the way, we really didn't have anything to declare. We had stopped smoking and I'd forgot to buy some liquor. We pulled into our reserved site at the Bel Air Park. I parked the rig to the applause of some of our old friends who had returned the previous week. The many stories about everybody's experiences over the last 6 months were so interesting. Traveling retirees get into so many unusual situations and have all the time in the world to talk about them. As we suspected and planned for, our 2 friends asked which route we had taken. Both were pleased when we told them, down one and up the other. Tom and Paul, with their wives Arlene and Rose, were good friends. All us guys would go cycling and the girls would chat about knickers and such. Both of these couples went south for the winter. Tom and Arlene loved Mazatlan in Mexico, whilst Paul and Rose owned a trailer in a beautiful park in Yuma, Arizona. By the way, we had taken 2 bicycles down to Baja. Never used them once, too much sand, so back they came and we sold them. Another loss. Talk about a waste of energy and valuable space. Our situation had changed with building the house in Baja. We didn't need to tow a trailer down there, and although our 25-feet trailer had served us well, it was on the small side to live in it for 6 months. We could look for a larger one that we could park year-round, on another park, for an affordable annual rent. If we stayed at Bel Air, we would have to pay the rent for summer and the same for the winter when we wouldn't be there. Not very practical financially. We came across a 31-feet Holiday Rambler, which would be ideal. I couldn't believe our good fortune. The dealer did a straight exchange for ours. Did okay with that deal. I found out later that the manufacturer of our new home was apparently part of the Harley-Davidson company. It was made in 1971, but still looked like new. It was all aluminum, except for the floorboards, and the interior was very luxurious, including gold bathroom fittings, etc. A super kitchen setup, and lots of closets were the big attractions for Rita. We both appreciated the spacious separate bedroom, and also a living room that was large enough to accommodate 2 armchairs if I removed the sofa bed. This was a more comfortable bed than it was a seat, so it had to go. Oliver was a great place for garage sales, which we often scoured for bargains. One of these was a banjo. Rita wondered why I'd bought it, but that's not unusual. I threw it in the pickup and forgot about it. Later that week, we went to a secondhand shop in Osoyoos where I saw a router that I fancied. I showed the guy my banjo and asked if he was interested. He told me to look around for something to swap. I picked up the router, including the table, and he agreed to exchange. Rita again asked, why? She was somewhat pleased when I told her that the chap was asking $40 for the router and $15 for the table. Not bad for a $6 banjo. Not finished yet. One guy heard that I had a router for sale and that I was looking for 2 armchairs in good condition. I exchanged the router for 2 almost new swivel rocking chairs. I removed the sofa bed from the trailer and put in the 2 chairs directly facing the TV, so the chair problem was solved for $6. Not having to tow a trailer meant that we didn't need our full-size van, so back to the dealers. We swapped the van for a small GMC pickup complete with a hardtop and even got $1,500 cash back. I was lucky again. Banbury Green, the one that was closed the year before, was the obvious choice for our new location. They had quoted a very reasonable yearly rent as they closed the park for the off-season, as we all know. So basically, the winter storage was free. The only problem now was moving our quite large trailer. As we had traded our towing vehicle, I approached the trader I had traded trailers with earlier. He agreed to move it to the new park in exchange for the sofa bed I'd taken out. Swings and roundabouts, isn't it? We secured a beautiful site. It was in a park-like setting on a slight hill just a few feet from and overlooking Skaha Lake. The view of this large lake, with all the boating activity, and Penticton in the background, was tremendous. It was a good choice, and the price was right. I set up all the services: water, sewer, and electricity. The next priority was to build a deck from which to enjoy the glorious view. This I did, and we equipped it with all the usual party equipment like the barbecue and beer cooler. One large family moved in and set up camp, close by, for a couple of weeks' vacation, and were quite noisy, partying, etc. After a couple of days, I realized they were speaking Greek, so I bade them good morning in their language. That's about all I know, and they were more considerate from then on. They were actually from Cyprus and enthralled by the photographs I still had from over 35 years ago. On a trip back to Oliver one day, I noticed a pile of kitchen cabinet doors outside a local secondhand shop. The owner explained that a customer had modernized his kitchen, and he wanted $25 for all of them. This assortment of 20 solid wood doors was just what I needed for Baja, so I bought them. We picked up all kinds of things, like matching cane lampshades, for our winter home. The big expense, though, would be a propane refrigerator, which I had been unable to find at a reasonable price. It had crossed my mind that we didn't need the large propane one in our trailer, so I planned on taking it to Baja and replacing it with an electric one. At the end of a very enjoyable and hot summer, we again had a decision to make regarding the route to Baja. 2 couples had invited us to their permanent homes for Thanksgiving. Fred and Mary at the park and another couple we had befriended at Bel Air, Valerie and Glenn. Both couples lived on the route we would take if we decided to head west and go south through California. The route decision was made. It was now time to load the van with all the stuff we accumulated, including the refrigerator and the cupboard doors. It was crammed in like sardines. I actually replaced the rear springs on the pickup just as a precaution. We left Penticton on 11th October and headed due west towards Vancouver. It was an easy and relaxing drive through the beautiful British Columbia scenery, but I found that I really had to be careful navigating the sometimes very winding road because of the heavy cargo. Fred and Mary had a gorgeous house in a very well-to-do area, and they could not have made us more welcome. Their lovely sons and daughters and their children came from all over the province, and we all had a super Thanksgiving. The next stop the following day was Valerie and Glenn's, about an hour's drive towards the coast. They were all ready for us, and we enjoyed another delicious festive meal. We truly had a lot to be thankful for, having such nice friends. The route was a good choice. In addition to the free meals, we could cross the U.S. border that was only 15 minutes from our last stop over. We motored through Washington on Highway 5, passing through Seattle, Tacoma, and into Oregon. You may be interested to know that in the state of Oregon, it is illegal for a customer to pump their own gas. I don't know why, but I'm sure they have a good reason: safety, job creation. Nothing much happened on our leisurely and cautious drive, and we eventually crossed the California border. We made it through the maze of highways around San Francisco and made a detour to Carmel. Rita had insisted we visit this beautiful village as we missed it first time around. It lived up to its reputation, and we strolled the quaint streets crowded with admiring tourists. It's a pity we couldn't stay longer, but we had until nightfall to reach the end of the famous Big Sur. I can't begin to describe the magnificence of the views from Highway 1, which ran right alongside the Pacific Ocean. You'll have to go see for yourself. Seriously, it is out of this world. Round every bend, and there are lots of them. is a different breathtaking vista of mountain slopes, pampas grass, evergreens, and the ocean glistening in the sunday. We enjoyed every inch of the 4-hour drive. We would have enjoyed it even more had it not been for the fact that many parts of the road had been washed away as a result of El Niño, the meteorological phenomenon. My slow driving around the bends really annoyed the hell out of the yuppies driving, or should I say racing, their fancy sports cars. All in all, it was wonderful and well worth the slight detour. It was only a few hundred miles. We stayed overnight in San Luis Obispo, just north of Los Angeles. The next morning, we wandered around looking for a coffee shop and met a couple who recommended a place a few miles down the highway called Madonna's. We passed it but never stopped. It looked far too expensive. Incidentally, we recently saw a television program regarding English antiquities and buildings being sold abroad. One story was about a particularly old barn which had been sold to a large corporation before being bought by the guy that owned Madonna's. He was interviewed, and he claimed he had never had the time to erect the barn on the land surrounding his restaurant, and it was still in its packing crate. He had bought it in 1932. Never had the time? Los Angeles hadn't changed, so we drove straight through and hung a left to Palm Springs and reached El Centro, where we stayed the night. It was now getting dark, and I wasn't going to drive through Mexico at night, even for just a couple of hours. We pulled the same stunt as before and crossed the border very early. But this time, the Mexican officer was wide awake. He did, however, have a tremendous sense of humor. He asked us to open the back of the truck and grinned as he saw all the stuff crammed in. Replying to his look of amazement and obvious question, I said, "Segundo basura." That was my attempt at telling him it was secondhand rubbish. He gave me an understanding smile and asked me how long we would be in Mexico. I told him that we loved his country and we would stay as long as we could. He grinned again, waved us on, and said, "Have a nice winter." He wasn't daft. Mexicali hadn't changed, so I plowed through as best I could and motored along the now very familiar road to San Felipe. We're nearly home now, so there will be no problems on this stretch. Or so we thought. We had noticed that there was an unusual abundance of desert plants, and the whole area looked too green, but thought nothing of it, until the road came to an abrupt end. The tarmac was non-existent. It had been washed away, and we were diverted onto the rough terrain on a makeshift path for roughly a mile, then back onto the road. For about 40 miles after the detour, it was a nightmare trying to avoid the huge potholes. These must have been the result of some unusual occurrence. We're smart. We suspected something quite devastating had happened in this area. We finally reached the ranch, and our jaws dropped when we saw our sad little house. There was a sand drift about a foot deep piled up in front of the door, which was now void of varnish. This was the least of our troubles. I managed to pry open the swollen door, and we stood there, literally crying with dismay. The whole interior was wet through. Plaster was coming off in places, and the ceiling was green with hairy fungus. There was about an inch of sand on the floor, and most of our paintings and photographs on the walls were lost. What the hell had happened? We soon found out from the neighbors who rushed across after giving us time to get over the initial shock. Hurricane Nora had hit the area 3 weeks prior to our arrival. Everybody had suffered, some worse than others, but it had been a terrible and frightening ordeal for the unfortunate people that had actually been there when the catastrophe occurred. In addition to the torrential rain from directly above, a destructive tidal wave of about 30 inches of water came gushing down from the mountain range. Walls and the more flimsy outhouses and storage sheds were washed away. Gardens, which take a lot of creative effort in the desert, and driveways were also swept away. But nobody had suffered a loss as great as one local lady. She was carrying her baby across the street when the powerful and fast-moving water hit. She dropped her baby and could do nothing but watch the poor child being swept away. God give her the strength to live with this nightmare. We all sympathized with each other and returned to repair our individual damages. One scary aspect of the whole thing was that the water had brought with it many of the creatures normally found only in the mountains. I don't know if my particular case resulted from this or not, as I never found out what bit my left arm just above the wrist. But I sure did suffer. There were 2 small fang-type mar, and my arm swelled to double its normal size, and I felt lousy. The medical opinion didn't provide much comfort. I was told that not knowing what bit me, there wasn't a whole lot they could do. That's Mexico. I was too confused at the time to understand fully what they told me, but I did hear something about the best-case scenario being the loss of my arm. The worst thing would be that I wouldn't have to worry about finishing off the house. I would be finished myself. Not the news I wanted. Over the next few weeks, my arm returned to its normal size, but my bite was still sore and inflamed. I tried all kinds of ointments that we had or been given by concerned friends. The main point of this story is that a Mexican that I met whilst visiting the local village gave me some white powder with instructions to sprinkle it on my food. It was ground up rattlesnake. The thought of this was not too appealing, but I was desperate. I religiously did as he said, and my arm started to improve, but it did not heal completely for another 15 months. Muchas gracias, señor. The secondary reason for relating my sob story is that this bite business, combined with the hurricane, made us both think twice about our future life in this area. So I guess the rot had set in yet again. However, we both put these setbacks to one side for the time being and got to work getting the house in shape. The work was backbreaking. Everything we touched was damp, and the thought of little creatures hiding away in all the many crevices just waiting to take chunks out of us didn't help. We proceeded, with extreme caution, to clean the place up, and I started the replastering job. Rita took on the arduous task of ridding the place of the sand that had blown under the door and set like cement with the water. It took us about 2 months to get back to the stage we were at when we left the previous April. I then concentrated on making the kitchen cabinets. I wanted to utilize as many of the doors as I could. The kitchen worked out fine, and I even managed to furnish the bathroom with a vanity and 2 extra cupboards. It now looked even more like an English country cottage with all the dark beams, etc., and now the similarly stained additional cupboards. I had to then start my big project of an enclosed patio. This would provide a great outdoor living area, as well as making the place look larger and more aesthetically pleasing. A couple of hundred concrete blocks, 2x8s and 5 sheets of plywood later, I was able to admire the cause of my now aching limbs. The next stage was applying white stucco inside and out to match the rest of the house. I must say that it looked fabulous when it was finished. We had to address the problem of where to accommodate Tracy, our good friend from Ottawa. She was visiting us for 2 weeks in late February, early March, and we only had the 1 bedroom. I suggested that I would share the bed with her and Rita could sleep on the patio. I don't know why Rita objected. I was only thinking of the fresh air that would be very healthy. Seriously, we were in luck. A good friend of ours gave us a new camper, which fitted on the bed of a pickup. Yet another display of generosity. It was too large for our vehicle, but it sat nicely on the concrete blocks that I laid at the side of the house. It was like a little granny flat sitting there. We were now ready. Our visitor could come any time. I employed a young Mexican lad to lay the flat stones I had bought for the patio floor. It was fascinating to watch this boy lay the random-sized and multicolored stone. It was so level you could play pool on it. My heart ached, though, while he worked with tools that I would have thrown away years ago, but he never complained. I gave him a few of my tools and a radio. I was fed up of listening to loud crackling. The finished patio was greatly admired by all, and his quality workmanship got him many more jobs on the ranch. I used the stones that were left over to build a crazy paving path to Tracy's little cottage. We picked up Tracy at Yuma Airport. It was a good reunion, but marred by the fact one of her suitcases had ended up at another airport. The airline official was very sympathetic and said he would send the case on to our address when it arrived the next day. His jaw dropped when I told him where we lived. Nevertheless, he honored his promise, and it did arrive when it was due, 150 miles by taxi. Now that's service. I've never seen anybody take to a place so well and so quickly as our welcome guest. Everybody was so good to her. We had parties galore, and she had a real good time. She wanted to return the next year, and was somewhat perturbed to gather that we were even thinking about giving up our apparently ideal desert lifestyle. During the previous few months, we had shared our life with several real good friends. Mac and Julie were one of the nicest couples you could wish to meet. They hailed from Reno and had built a house a block to the rear of us. During the summer months, they traveled all over the states in their converted Greyhound bus. What a luxurious and comfortable motorhome they had meticulously built over many years. It was a credit to them both. We spent a lot of time with this lovely couple who taught us to play Mexican Train, a domino game. I wish I could teach you how to play in this book. It is so enjoyable and habit-forming. They had a satellite system, and every time there was a British program on, Mac would come to fetch us. He particularly liked Inspectors Frost and Morse, so we saw just about every episode. Paul and Elda were another super couple who played a big part in us enjoying life there. Elda will read this book, and I don't want to embarrass her, but I must elaborate on this beautiful lady. She was 79 years of age and looked like a 50-year-old. Her tall and elegant stature, with legs like you'd never believe, made even other women stop and admire. Her smile lit up the room. I used to get a big kick when we went down to the jacuzzi. Young men would whistle at her in her flattering swimsuit, and when I put them in the picture, they blushed and didn't know what to say. There were many other people that would be sadly missed if we decided not to return to Baja. But the fact of the matter was that we were seriously in doubt as to whether we would be 100% happy after all that had happened. It didn't even help any when we were told that the last hurricane was 30 years ago, and it would probably be another 30 before one came again. With my luck, I'd still be around, and the thought of tackling all that work again at the age of 90 didn't bear thinking about. The work on our casa continued in order to make life more comfortable and increase its value in case we sold. I upgraded the solar system to provide capacity to power the outside lights and various other bits and pieces of electrical appliances we had added. Putting the rooftop-mounted solar panels on a swivel, movable from the ground, helped me get the most advantage from the sun, that very kindly and freely supplied us with power. Another novel idea was to put a voltmeter and ammeter in the kitchen instead of the usual outside battery room, so Rita could tell at a glance if we had enough power to do a particular task. Neighbors wondered why I also put an outside electrical outlet on the front close to the roof. I let them wonder a while and then told them it was for the Christmas lights to avoid having extensions hanging all over the place. Do you remember the doctor all those years ago? He was right. I did try to think of everything. Despite our very enjoyable current lifestyle, now the casa was complete. Our ongoing fear got the better of us. We sadly put our dream home up for sale. It would probably take 12 months to sell, so we anticipated another winter there. It was now time to drive the now deeply suntanned Tracy to Yuma Airport. The two girls cried during the goodbye bit, and we then left her to jet away with her Mexican souvenirs and happy memories. Whilst in Yuma, the winter home of thousands of snowbirds, we visited the massive flea market. It was the largest I had ever seen and covers every inch of the former Greyhound racetrack. We couldn't resist looking at satellite systems. One thing missing from our life was our own television. We had viewed the 50 or so videos that we had recorded in Canada. I'm not really a couch potato, but it goes dark in Baja around 5 p.m., and one doesn't wander too far in the desert after dark, so home entertainment is a must. But you can only play so many domino and card games. The salesman offered us a deal we couldn't refuse, and after picking up some more bargains, we rushed home to set up our new toy. There was only one incident on our way home, but it was painful. We had stopped at traffic lights in Calexico and the car behind us, and the one behind him didn't.